Hi everyone, this is Natalie here, otherwise known as Ashtanga Yoga Girl, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about a posture called Padmasana. So it's a little bit of a tricky posture, and I get asked quite a lot for advice on how to work up to the posture and different ways of working into the body to prepare for Padmasana. So I'm going to share with you all of my best tips and tricks for Padmasana. Now, I like to break this posture down into three key movements that you need to master if you want to sit comfortably in Padmasana. And the first of these components is the length of your lovely quadriceps, the length of your thigh muscles. Now, it might seem a bit counterintuitive. What has this got to do with a hip opening posture like Lotus pose, like Padmasana? But when you think about it, to come into Padmasana, you really need to close your knee joint so that when you are opening and closing the hip and you're bringing the foot over to the groin, you don't want to leave your knee joint open in that position because it's going to be vulnerable to a lot of twisting, and the knee is mostly just a hinge joint, so you don't want to allow your knee to twist that much. That's what creates pain and discomfort in this posture. So closing the knee joint means you have to be able to get your heel as close to your sit bone as you can, or bring your calf muscle to the back of your thigh. And for some people, at first, that's really hard, especially if you've got quite muscly thighs, or if you've played a lot of other sports, then you tend to have quite tight quadriceps. So the best posture that I know to lengthen your lovely thighs is Virasana. So do you know Virasana? It's the one where you're kneeling like this, and then if you're fairly new to the posture, it might be quite uncomfortable to have the hips so low because your quads might be quite tight. So just take a block or a blanket, a rolled up blanket like this, or anything really that you have lying around, a cushion, pillow, and just prop your hips up slightly so that you feel a mild to moderate stretch in the quadricep muscles. So in this posture, it's good to stay for about 5 to 10 minutes. It seems like quite a long time, but this is one that you would do outside of your practice. Maybe when you're watching TV, or I like to work in this posture, so I've got quite a low desk and I sit down in Virasana when I'm working on my laptop. So that's why you don't want to have it too intense that you can't sit there for a little bit of time. And over time, as your quads start to lengthen, this position will be super easy, and you'll start to reduce the height of your props. So if a blanket is really good for this, because then you can just unroll your blanket slightly when you feel that your quads are lengthening. So this is part one, lengthening the quads. And when you feel like you can pretty much fully close your knee joint, then I'd say move on to step 2. So the second element of working up to Padmasana I like to teach is the opening of the hips. So to open the hip like this, you've got your knee joint closed like we talked about in part 1, and to open the hip you need to lengthen your inner thighs, so these muscles here in the groin. And there's one posture in particular there's two postures in particular that I like to use for this. The first is Janu Shirshasana A, or Baddha Konasana, which is basically Janu A on both sides. So for Baddha Konasana, you bring the soles of your feet together and bring the heels towards the groin as far as it's comfortable for you. For some people it might be further out, for some people it might be closer in, and just sit up comfortably. Now you can take your thumbs and place them inside your feet, and then open the soles of the feet like a book, like the pages of a book. And you should already feel when you do this that the inner thighs here are starting to stretch. So as you can see, Baddha Konasana is one of those postures that you can sit in whilst you're doing other things as well. So I like to practice this pose while I'm reading or watching TV or relaxing, and it really helps to open up the body ready for your Padmasana posture. So when you feel like the knees are starting to drop down towards the floor, they don't need to be touching the floor, flat on the floor or anything, but once you feel like you've got a bit of opening going on in the hips, then I believe you're ready to work on stage 3. So the third part of the lotus posture that I think is important is the internal rotation of the hips, the thigh bones. And it sounds a bit counterintuitive again, because you think when you're coming into lotus pose that you are externally rotating your thigh to get into the posture, which is true. But then once you're sitting in the pose, you need a little bit of internal rotation to allow yourself to sit up nice and tall in the pose without hurting your lower back, without your lower back taking some of the strain. And so one posture that's really perfect for exploring this movement of internal rotation is Janu Shirshasana A. So with your left leg extended, if you then close your right knee joint, like we worked with in step 1, then you open your hip, as we worked on in step 2, and then you reach towards your foot for Janu A, but instead of trying to pin the hip back, explore what it feels like to roll the thigh bone forward with you as you reach forward for the foot. So you can just see that very subtle movement of internal rotation in my thigh bone. So you might notice when you do that, your right hip will tend to lift up off the floor. So just play around with, going between, it's like a play off between lifting the hip way too much versus not getting any of that internal rotational movement. So just have a play and see if you can find that movement. So once you have explored those 3 parts, so we've lengthened the quadriceps, we have opened the thighs, lengthened the inner thighs, and we've also worked on rotation of the hip joints, internal rotation. Then we'll have a look at how to actually get into and out of lotus posture safely. So this is very, very important technique. The technique I learned from Gregor Mela and Monica Gauci, so I teach this in all my classes, and it looks a little bit like this. So if you start in Dandasana with your legs out straight, and then starting always with the right leg first in Padmasana, going to bend the right knee, closing the knee joints, bringing the heel close to the sit bone. Then allow the knee to drop out to the side, so you're opening the hip, lengthening the inner thigh. Then with your hands, take them underneath your foot and very, very gently, so don't wrench the foot, but just gently pick the foot up, draw the heel across to the navel, and then into the groin. So there was no like pulling movement or forcing myself into position. It was a very mindful and natural movement. So from here we're in the half lotus pose, so we could do an Ardha Baddha, half bound with a forward fold, or we can go into the full version. So let's have a look. Now, the left side is trickier because you've already got the right side in position, but try to do exactly the same on this side. So bend the left knee, closing the knee joint, step 1. Step 2, open the hip, take the knee out to the side. And this is the tricky bit, is step 3, without opening the knee joint too much, hands under the foot, try to take the knee wide and then across into the groin. Okay, how does that feel? Feels pretty good. Now when you're in the posture, you can find that slight internal rotation of your thigh bones that will start to help your spine assume its natural position. So you're not trying to tuck your tailbone under and keep your spine really flat, just allow the spine to express its natural curve. And then coming out of the posture, again, just as important as coming in, we're going to reverse the movement. So gently, hands under the left foot, take the knee wide and place the foot down. You can see my knee joint has not opened. Then close the hip joint. And only when the hip joint is closed and the knee is straight, then open the knee joint. Same on this side. Gently take the knee wide, close the hip joint, and then open the knee joint. So that's pretty much it. Those are my 3 main areas to work on. The lengthening of the quadriceps, the opening of the inner thighs, like opening the hips, and then also the internal rotation of the thigh bones that will help you prepare for practicing Padmasana safely. I really hope you found this useful. Let me know if you have any questions at all. I'm always happy to help, and I hope that I will see you again soon. Namaste.